Welcome back to Via Hafta TV. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and this is sponsored by Via Hafta, the Canadian Jewish Humanitarian and Relief Committee. I'm really excited to have with us today Dr. Epi Epstein. How are you, Epi?
I'm fine.
Good. Who is currently in the employ of Via Hafta, a really terrific human being. I'm so excited to have you because really, to me, what you personify is the little guy who was born into a family where the father was a salesman. You know, previously they had owned sort of a store on a corner in Toronto, and eventually moved on to be a great humanitarian, working for the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, and also a Jewish educator. I think your life, as I told you before, really reflects what growth could be or should be. So thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Was that a good introduction?
Tremendous.
So let's indeed start at the beginning. You were born in Toronto, Canada.
I was.
And your dad was a salesman. What did he sell?
He sold a lot of things. He sold dry cleaning supplies. When we had a grocery store, of course, he worked in the grocery store. He sold food supplies. At one point, he was selling Polish hams.
Polish hams.
Yeah.
Which is a Jewish thing to do.
That's right.
Hey, look, if there's money in it, right?
That's right. Polish hams and Polish sesame candy.
Do you remember the store?
Very well. I remember sneaking into the pickle barrel and taking out pickles.
Really?
Yep.
I had friends whose fathers owned stores in Kitchener, Ontario, which is about an hour away from
Right,
Toronto.
right.
And on Sunday afternoon, before we would play sports, we would go in there and drink as much chocolate milk as we possibly could. Now, my father was a rabbi, and I thought, this would be a lot more fun,
Absolutely. Because we owned a store, I knew all the names of vegetables and fruits.
You knew all the names?
Yeah.
Did you know any bizarre names that people wouldn't know?
Yeah, like I knew what asparagus was. None of my friends knew what asparagus was.
Right. Rhubarb.
Rhubarb, there you go.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that was one of the things that led up to your great success in life.
No doubt about it.
So, as I said, you grew up in Toronto. You went to school here. You were religious, but not ultra right wing, right?
We were a conservative family, belonged to a large conservative synagogue, and very traditional.
And very traditional.
My mother was born in Europe, so we were traditional.
Where was she born?
In Ukraine.
Was that very much part of her overview of life? Did she bring that into the home?
Absolutely.
How so?
She spoke a beautiful Yiddish. She didn't want us to know Yiddish, but she spoke Yiddish.
Yeah.
She sang beautiful Yiddish songs that I sing to this day.
Like what?
All kinds of things. Lulinke mein Kinderlech, Lulinke mein Kind.
Nice. Do you know Hasukale, Hakleine?
She didn't sing that, but I know that.
Yeah. What were they like, your parents, as people?
They were good people, solid folks, honest, hardworking, very hardworking. There was a kind of, if you will, Jewish work ethic in our family.
Yeah. In other words, woke up at 6 in the morning.
Very early in the morning.
Did you see your dad very much? I don't know.
Yeah, he was also very much a social person. So he bowled and had friends and belonged to societies and was very active in our shul.
So your mom died at a very early age, didn't she?
When I was 14. She was 49.
Well, what happened to her?
Cancer. In the days when they didn't really know what to do about it.
At 14 years old, I guess you're in about grade 9, right?
That's right.
You remember when she died, the day she died?
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah. What happened?
It was the second night of Sukkot. She died on the first day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot.
Yeah.
And it was a sad, terribly sad moment in my life. I was in bed. I heard speaking in the kitchen, and clearly they came and gave me the terrible news. Of course, it was expected. She was dying for a long time.
So when you hear about kids who lose their parents at 8 years old, 10 years old, 12, 14, it must really resonate with you.
It resonates. I have complete empathy with them.
I imagine so.
I understand exactly where they are, and I also understand what's going to happen to them to a great extent in the future.
What will happen?
It has an effect on you for life. There's no doubt about that. You grow up without a mother. For one thing, you become a very good cook. That was one of the things.
Which you did.
Yeah, I love cooking. If I didn't cook, I wasn't going to eat. So I started to learn how to cook very young.
Now, your father stayed with us for a few more years.
My father remarried, actually.
Nice woman?
A wonderful woman, but sadly, she also died young, and my father died fairly young, too. He died at the age of 62.
And how old were you when he passed away?
I was in my late 20s.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say in the very first part of this interview that you had some sores early on in life. You had some difficulties.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. But then we move into your 20s, right? And things sort of started to fly for you, right? You found yourself in the world of academia. How did you get into that?
Well, it was actually a quirk. I was training to be a Jewish educator. I finished the joint program, which is a joint academic program between Columbia University and the Jewish Theological Seminary, and was training to be a Jewish educator and was already teaching in a school. And out of nowhere, while I was working on a doctorate, I got an offer to head up a new program at McGill University, sponsored by the Jewish community and McGill, to train Jewish teachers.
Yes.
The first of its kind. And
In Montreal.
In Montreal.
Yep.
And I was 27 years old.
Right.
And it was to be an assistant professor, and it was a real challenge. I'd say it was more than challenging. It was a little threatening, actually.
Yeah. When you're 27 years old and you're standing in front of teachers, don't you feel a little bit like a imposter?
There's a sense of, what am I doing here?
Exactly,
you know? Exactly, right.
I mentioned on another show that I do high holiday services here in Toronto, Congregation Habonim. So I'm 51 years old, and I've gotten over a bunch of my neuroses, although I have lots more in the drawer, as you can imagine. But for a long time, I would stand in front of these people espousing what the high holidays are supposed to be, forgiveness, etc. I'm thinking, who am I? What am I doing here, right?
Yeah. On the other hand, I had a kind of natural tendency and talent for teaching, and to translate that into training other teachers came to me somewhat naturally, with of course a lot of academic training is along with it.
We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we're going to go into the most fascinating part of your life, which is Morocco and Siberia.
Yeah.
You started working for the JDC, which is a story in of itself. So stay with us, because we have lots more to tell you. We're taking you into the world of empathy with our guest, Seymour Epstein. Welcome back to Via Hafta TV with our guest today, Epstein. We should say Dr. Epstein. As we mentioned in the first part of this interview, you had a difficult upbringing. But what I find very often is that people who grow up losing their parents very young, particularly your mother when you were 14 years old, that you find that those same people rise to the occasion, if you will. And you started teaching, teachers at 27 years old. That went on until you were about 35, eventually to accept a job with the JDC, or the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. Now, that's a very auspicious organization. Tell us about the Joint. Who are they?
The Joint is an amazing organization. It's one of the oldest NGOs in the world. It was founded in 1914 in New York. It was founded originally to help Russian Jews who were in Palestine at the time, who were close to starvation. But it was in Russia before the revolution. And it operated through the early years of the revolution in a special kind of deal with Lenin, and now operates around the world. By the time I joined up in '81, its most famous period was, of course, the period of the Second World War, and immediately after the war in the displaced persons camps in Europe.
Now, when Via Hafta was started early on in 1997, we actually decided to work very closely with the JDC. It's called the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, or the JDC, or the Joint. And I'm happy that we did, because they're an extremely professional organization, very generous, and very helpful. So you're reading a professional magazine, and you see an article in there about a job in Morocco, right? Had you been in Morocco?
I'd never been to Morocco, and I didn't know I knew about the Joint, but I thought they had gone out of existence somewhere around 1950.
So a lot of Jews think such things. They don't know about the Joint.
Yeah.
But did you have wanderlust?
I had a little bit of wanderlust, but the truth is that I had no idea what this was all about. I even thought it was a kind of a Purim joke, the ad. When I called New York and found out it was a real position, I was single at the time. I knew a little French. The job required Hebrew. Hebrew was my second language. It seemed like a good thing to do for 2 years, but I lasted for 18.
Okay, so you go to Morocco, Casablanca.
Casablanca.
And your job, again, is as an educator in Morocco. Now, give us a sense of sort of the demographics of this North African country at the time?
So it's on the tip of northwest Africa, and it's, I used to say Casablanca is where Africa turns south.
Right.
And the truth is that it's a gorgeous country, large, beautiful topography. At the time that I arrived, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 Jews left. There had been around 300,000 Jews at the end of the Second World War. Most of them had left for Israel, France, Quebec, California, Venezuela. But there was a lot to do. I was there as a conseiller pédagogique, as a pedagogic consultant for the Jewish schools.
Yes. So it's interesting, by the way, they take a Canadian Jew, really, who was educated in Toronto and Quebec.
And Ashkenazi.
And Ashkenazi at that, and you land in a Sephardic country. How did the different
Culture
cultures...
shock.
Yeah,
Culture shock.
Well, forget you. What about them?
Yeah, well,
They call us Polacos, you know.
Right. They had a little trouble getting used to me, but the truth is that through goodwill on both sides, and also the fact that there was work to be done, real work to be done, and they had tremendous respect for the joint. So they had a sense of, if the joint sent this fellow, it's probably good for us. Let's see what he's got to offer. There were times when what I had to offer wasn't acceptable to the local culture, and there were times when the local culture wasn't so acceptable to me. But for the most part, we found a way of working together, and I learned a great deal.
Like what?
I learned about a wonderful culture that I knew nothing about, the Moroccan Jewish culture that was literally thousands of years old and was filled with exotica that I had never even imagined. Gorgeous music, different prayers, a wonderful cuisine, a warmth that comes from a certain kind of confidence in knowing where you are. The expression in French is bien dans sa peau, feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Yes.
And they were comfortable in their own skin, even having experienced this mass migration of Jews out of the country.
So what's that like when you're surrounded by 300,000 Jews and you sort of proverbially or metaphorically wake up one day and the vast majority of them are gone? Do you feel like leftovers? Do you feel like survivors?
It might be a little like losing your mother at the age of 14.
Oh, how interesting is that?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I had a serious identification with the situation as well.
You know, I did a restaurant and food show on the radio and TV for about 10 years. And some of the best chefs in Canada said that Moroccan cuisine is the best in the world.
The Moroccans think so, and they're probably right. However, I have to tell you that Tunisian cuisine is pretty exciting too, and the Moroccans think of it the way some Lithuanian Jews think about Polish cuisine. So the truth is that North Africa has a great cuisine, and the mixture of all the blend there of Tunisian, Moroccan cuisine, it's all very, very delicious.
What did you love? What did you make? What type of Moroccan food?
I loved every form of couscous there was. In Tunisia, I loved brique. I loved all the tagines that there were. I loved what they did with fish, every kind of amazing thing they did with fish.
Give us a quick recipe for couscous.
Oh, couscous, you have to speak to my wife, but you steam it and you cook it and you flip it in the air and everything, and then you make all kinds of sauces. In Tunisia, they also have a fish couscous, which is very exciting. Moroccans won't touch it. But I think the best couscous is probably any couscous that has lamb in it.
You know, some people's journey starts and stops in the very same city that they were born in. And yours certainly took you around the world. We are now talking to Epstein about his time in Morocco. Soon enough, things changed, and you were sent to Siberia. When we come back from the break, we're going to sort of conclude with your life in Morocco and take our viewers into the world of Siberia, where I understand there were lots and lots of flies. Is that right?
A lot of flies.
A lot of flies. So stay with us. You're watching Via Hafta TV, and we are taking you into the world of empathy with Epi Epstein. Welcome back to Via Hafta TV. If you'd like to know more about Via Hafta, please go to our website at www.viahafta.org. We just we're in the middle of Pesach, really, and We just did our Passover Seder for the homeless. We had 150 people there, and it really, really was a special occasion because I think it personified the line in the Haggadah, which is those who are hungry, let them come and eat. Now, you actually popped into the Seder. I was really happy to see you there.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
What was it like for you?
It was a very special experience. I kept looking in the faces of the participants and seeing how much they were enjoying being there, and also how they were participating in the spirit of the Seder.
How were they? How were they participating?
I could see from their faces they were filled with the spirit of the time. It wasn't just the food; it was the sense of the text of the Haggadah. It was very, very beautiful.
Had you ever seen anything like that?
I was there last year,
Yeah.
and I found this one even more moving.
I'm so happy that you were there. Leonardo da Vinci said that really the way of finding the character in human beings is to watch them while they're eating and also drinking. So he used to invite people whom we would call homeless or peasants to his home, and he would give them lots and lots of food, a great feast, and things to drink, and they would get happier and happier throughout the evening, and he would sketch them. And I'm like you. You know, I looked around the room, and I saw our visitors there, our guests, many of whom live under bridges, you know, at the end of cul-de-sacs here in Toronto. And I, as a Jew, just, you know, felt so wholesome at having the ability, the opportunity to make such a Seder.
Yeah.
And also, I really feel it's a badge of honor to be surrounded by that population. Did you understand that?
Absolutely, absolutely. If the Haggadah itself says that the hungry should come and eat, that's what we were doing. It was just wonderful. These were people who were hungry.
Absolutely. So you spent a number of years in Morocco. You told me a wonderful story as an educator in Morocco about a young man who unfortunately every class seems to have, who just couldn't make it in school.
We found a number of children like that, and there was one boy that we put into a special class after figuring out exactly how to do it in the context of Morocco. And he wasn't making it, and he wasn't even making it in the special class. And because he was so frustrated, he was also a behavioral problem.
Yeah.
He was just a kid with lots and lots of issues. Plus, he was completely illiterate in all the languages that mattered in Morocco. He couldn't read French. He couldn't read Hebrew. His Arabic was limited to the most simplest level of street Arabic. But we got this idea, since young Moroccan boys, Jewish boys in the synagogue, Friday night, read a chapter of Song of Songs in the ritual recitation of Song of Songs in the Moroccan service. We got the idea that if we
They read it aloud.
They read it aloud for the whole congregation with
Yes.
great pride, and they usually belt it out.
Yeah.
And we got the idea that if he could do just one chapter once in his life, it would give him a place in the community of men in Morocco.
Yeah.
And we taught him with great difficulty. I think he actually memorized both the words and the tune. But when he belted it out, I happened to be in synagogue that Friday evening, and to see him and his father and the pride in the congregation, knowing full well who this boy was,
Yes.
and having him sort of become a member of the community through this chanting was just an experience I'll never, ever forget as long as I live.
Is it part of your life's narrative?
There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The potential. I'm not going to say that his life was changed by it, that he became, you know, a whiz kid after that. That's not the case. But this did have an effect, both on him and the way people perceived him.
You know, I think we who work in the humanitarian field are often challenged by the idea of really, what are we doing? You know, it's like you put your finger in the dike and you plug one hole,
Right.
and then water spritzes out the other. And I was once speaking to a woman whom we had worked with, and I told her this. I said, I get very frustrated by the field that we work in. I almost feel like, okay, great. All right, we've done something for a homeless person, but then there's droves of other people who call us and say they need help. And she turned to me, and again, this is a person, you know, whom we had helped, and she turned to me. She said, "What? I'm not enough. I'm not enough." She's right.
Yeah,
She's
no,
right.
Of course. Every single victory is a critical victory.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
You learn a lot when you go to another country, particularly a country that's so dramatically different than the culture from which you came, right?
Sure.
There are no Loblaws in Casablanca or Meknes, right? In the Jewish community in Morocco, there's a very interesting structure that exists. There's really one man who has a relationship with the king and who's responsible for the Jewish community, right?
Right.
Who was that man when you were there?
When I was there, it was a Monsieur David Amar, who was the president of the community, and he's what we call in Hebrew a shtadlan. He was the court Jew.
Yes.
And on Throne Day, which is the day of the coronation of the king, people would be glued to the television to see how he would be received by the king that year.
Really?
Yes. And how he was received was a kind of predictor for how the Jews were going to fare.
How would he be received generally?
Well, the question would it be an embrace? Would it be a formal kiss on the hand? Was there some sense of, a cordial greeting? That was all very important to the relationship that the Jews had, even though the policy of the Moroccan government was very pro-Jewish, and for the most part, the king was completely in line with his father's policy of being protective of the Jews.
Do you remember ever watching TV and seeing that it wasn't an embrace, but more of a cordial handshake?
Well, we got the sense that there were times when there was tension.
Yes.
And it could be not tension with the community, but tension specifically with the court Jew himself.
Yes.
And in fact, this particular court Jew was at one point expelled from the country.
These stories get richer and richer.
Yeah, right.
We're talking to Seymour Epstein, Epstein, who started his life in Toronto, moved to Morocco, then soon enough ended up in Paris, and after that, Siberia. So I feel like we're playing a board game here, and when we come back, we're going to continue moving our pieces along those little squares. So please stay with us because you're watching via Hafta TV, taking you into a world of empathy. Welcome back to Via Hafta Television, taking you into the world of empathy with Seymour Epstein. Some of the things that Via Hafta does, by the way, we're a very creative organization, I think it's safe to say. We have a creative writing contest for the homeless. We have a Via Hafta school, it's called the Street Academy, for people living on or near the street. And we've done a lot of work internationally in places like Haiti and Zimbabwe. We've worked in the rainforests of Guyana and Honduras and El Salvador. And one of the things that we do through Via Hafta is we go around the world. And of course, we do work in the areas of medicine and education. And we express the Jewish narrative to the populations that we work with. And the idea is there are a lot of people in the world who don't know what a Jew is, who've never met a Jew, or perhaps they have met Jews and they have some ideas about who we are. So when we go to places like Guyana, we could make a Shabbat meal in the rainforest of Guyana.
We do.
And I think that's very effective. Now, you've done a little bit of traveling with us. While you've been with Via Hafta, you've gone to Guyana, right?
Mm-hmm, twice.
How was your trip to South America, Guyana?
Oh, it's fascinating. First of all, I was fascinated by our work there.
Yes.
But it was also a culture that I didn't know and had to get to know. And first of all, the beauty of the interior is overwhelming. The large rivers, the likes of which I'd never seen.
Yes,
maybe in
Essequibo.
Siberia, actually.
Yes.
And the jungle, and also the warmth of the local population. So it was a whole bunch of new insights for me.
Were you a Jew there?
I'm a Jew everywhere.
Were you a Jew consciously? Were you an outward Jew?
Sure, I express myself as a Jew wherever I go.
Yes.
Sure, absolutely. And in this case, I was representing a Jewish organization.
So let's go back to your life,
Sure.
which again I find it's like a puzzle. You spent a number of years in Morocco. You ended up in Paris for 2 years, and there you were in charge of the JDC's offices.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, just a sidebar. Recently there was a terrible, terrible terrorist attack in Toulouse, and you had some affiliation with that family.
Sure.
Right?
The school that was attacked was an Torah school, and that chain started in Morocco, and I worked very intimately with that chain of schools in Morocco,
Yes.
and with the director, who is now the chief rabbi of Morocco, Rabbi Aaron Monsenego. And if you noted, one of the little girls who was killed was a Montenegro. She's related to the chief rabbi of Morocco and related to the founder of the Otzar Torah movement. Otzar Torah schools are all through France and in Morocco and in a few other places.
Well, what happened inside of you? What happened in your gut and your soul when you saw
Well, I immediately
that those little kids
related, of course, related to all the children I knew who went through those schools, and that in France, the danger that they find themselves now in, of course. It's a sad situation.
Were you in any dangerous situations in France?
No, France was fairly quiet when I was there, but there was always, you had to be sort of street smart and be aware of your environment, which is true in Morocco as well.
You've always worked in the area of education.
Yes.
In fact, your thesis for your doctorate had to do with various different forms of Jewish education.
That's right.
But what's the one model of Jewish education that's always astounded you, that you thought would serve us very well, the Jewish people very well, if we decided to put more effort into it?
Well, the truth is that my thesis was about models in plural of Jewish education. The idea being that there's no one model, but that there are certain models that we should be developing, and the idea of the thesis was based on some other work by other scholars that teachers should be comfortable in a variety of different teaching models. So, for instance, in Jewish education, one of the ancient models is chavruta, and
Yes.
I wrote a quarter of my thesis was about what's called peer-mediated instruction or peer coupling, but what we called for centuries chavruta.
What is that, Chavru? What is it?
Two people at a minimum studying together over the same text, and the give and take between the two of them arguing through the text, so that on the one hand you're studying with a peer, on the other hand you're not studying alone, so that you're constantly challenged by the other's view of the text. It's a wonderful model, and it's been adapted to use in all forms, other forms of education, including general education, non-Jewish education.
Really? Where else have they adapted it?
Actually, there was an article a few years ago that a private girls' school in Toronto, which I'll keep nameless,
Yes.
was using chavruta to teach Shakespeare.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to yeshiva myself. I was there for about 6 years, unbeknownst to many. No, I did not look like that then, like this then. And I love the chavruta concept. There would be 150 of us in the middle of the Beit HaMedrash where we studied, and everybody would be standing by a stender, shuckling back and forth and arguing a concept in Baba Batra or what have you. And it worked beautifully because you become a soulmate.
That's right.
With your chavruta.
That's right.
Do you have a particular chavruta you've been learning
I
with?
still study with a chavruta to this day.
For how many years?
The last few years since I've been here.
Yeah. And do you have a sense that you know this man's mind?
We know each other very well, and we get along very well, and we enjoy each other's give and take, but we also enjoy each other's humor.
It's interesting. You study with Adin Steinsaltz?
I didn't study with him, but I did work with him. So I studied with his books, and when you study with his commentary, it's as if he's in the room.
Nechama Leibowitz is certainly one of the greatest Torah scholars in the last, 50, 60 years.
I was
And
very privileged.
You were in her class?
I was very privileged to be her student in 1965.
What was it like?
It was wonderful. Even then, we thought she was at least 300 years old. But she was, the joke about Nechama Leibowitz was the reason she believed in Torah from Sinai is because she was there.
She was there. Yeah. Very nice.
But, she was a great, great pedagogue, a great pedagogue. Very interesting woman.
When we were growing up, we thought Siberia was the place where the Russian hockey team was sent after losing to the Canadians after the 1972 series. But it was far more than that. There was a Jewish community there. There still is. Our guest today, Epi, was working there. And I know you have a lot to say about your time there, more than just the flies hovering around you all the time.
Right.
So please stay with us, because we're watching Via Hafta TV, and we're taking you into the world of empathy with Dr. Seymour Epi Epstein. I've always wanted to write a book, but for some reason I'm prevented from doing so. Either it's my ADD or ADHD, or perhaps I'm too busy with other things. I have no idea. But God willing, by the end of my life, I should live to 120. I'm going to write a book. Okay. Now you have.
Yeah.
You wrote a book called From Couscous to Cholent.
No, couscous to kasha.
Sorry, couscous to kasha. Well, similar cuisine, anyways, right?
Right.
Now, this wasn't a recipe book, though.
No, not at all.
What's the book about?
Well, it represented the couscous period of my life in Morocco.
Yes.
And the kasha period of my life in Siberia.
Ah, perfect segue.
Right.
Perfect segue. Siberia, cold?
Cold in the winter, hot in the summer.
People are warm?
The warmest people I've met in a long time.
Really?
Yep.
The people of Siberia?
Yeah.
Do they drink a lot of vodka?
They drink vodka, but they're just genuinely warm people.
Are they warm?
Yes, they're warm.
Tell us about someone you remember in Siberia.
Actually, some of my fondest memories in Siberia are being in people's homes. And because I was always trying to get out of my hotel room anyway, but me being in people's homes and having long meals with many vodka toasts in the middle in people's homes, people who are reactivating their lives as Jews in the various communities across the breadth of Siberia. Those were some of the best memories I have. Met some wonderful families.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Tell us about one of the families.
Well, there were Jews who came to Siberia for a variety of reasons. There were Jews who were the children of people who had been sent to Siberia under the worst circumstances. There were descendants of serious communists who moved to Siberia out of ideological fervor and wanted to build Siberia as a Yiddish-speaking part of the Communist Party. There were Jews who, one for the best of reasons, went to Siberia so that their children could get into university, which was going to be limited to them as Jews in the western parts of Russia. So there were all kinds of Jewish families.
I mean, when I think you're working for the JDC,
right?
We should tell our viewers that. When I think of the Soviet Union and the former Soviet Union, particularly Siberia, I think of Gray Skies. I think of the Russian novelists, you know, who spoke in great length about the characters in their novel, all of whom seem so deeply depressed.
Well, I think you could get depressed in Siberia because of the weather and the short days in the winter. But the truth is that people found a kind of inner life in their own quarters, and you found people whose hobbies, for instance, were languages.
Yes.
They learned Italian and French without ever going or ever even having a dream of going to Italy or France. It was just impossible in the Soviet period. But they read much more than we do. They found a life. Plus sports. There were winter sports and ice fishing, and I had friends who had a yacht on the big rivers of Siberia.
Yeah. What about culture, theater? And
culture, of course. Opera and ballet, some of my favorite things. You could find all of that in just about every city in the Siberia.
Are there particular operas or ballets that you remember when you were in Siberia?
Actually, we had a wonderful experience. We went to the big opera house in Novosibirsk and found the name of a very close friend of my wife's, my wife is involved in the world of ballet.
Yes.
Who had been a judge in some kind of a ballet competition in Novosibirsk, in the middle of nowhere. Novosibirsk is the exact geographic middle of Russia. And it was there were thrills again and again in the world of culture as well, of course.
So your job once again was as an educator in Siberia.
My job was not only as an educator, but that too. We were helping Jews reestablish themselves. Those Jews who had decided to stay either permanently or for a while,
yes,
and not leave for Israel or elsewhere. So we were establishing Jewish kindergartens, Jewish supplementary schools. In Siberia, there were no Jewish day schools, but synagogue life was being reestablished. There were a number of Siberian cities that had synagogues through the Soviet period. There were others that didn't. Jews were adamant about creating welfare societies along with the Joint to help Jews in need, and a Jewish cultural life as well, which was very important. Choirs, Hillel groups, all kinds of things.
Is there a young man or a young woman that you remember from your time in Siberia that we should speak of?
I remember one of the Hebrew teachers. I remember two of the Hebrew teachers. One in Novosibirsk was just full of energy. It's a wonderful woman. She must have learned Hebrew the year before.
Yes.
And she became the Hebrew teacher for a while.
What was her name?
That I can't. It was either Galina, Masha, something like that.
One
I
of
can't
those,
remember, right?
Yeah.
But she was just full of energy, and she was also becoming, she was sort of becoming a Jew all over again after what was really 3 generations of Soviet suppression of Jewish life. But I remember one of her classes, she asked her students to say what they ate for breakfast in the morning. And this man got up and with a thick Russian accent said, Baboker ani ochel naknik im chalav, which means in the morning I eat sausage with milk.
Yes.
And she said, Lotov, not good. Jews don't eat sausage with milk.
Yeah.
So in fact, it was not only language, it was also a kind of coming to grips with Jewish ways.
I'm very envious of your trek around the world. I've been running Via Hafta for 16 years, and I've had agoraphobia most of those years. I mean, that's a story in of itself, sort of the guy who founded a humanitarian organization and hasn't made it too far. I've gone to my trips to Argentina and to Israel, but I've never been able to take up our international department on trips to Ethiopia and the like, which is very sad for me, but still I think I've accomplished something. So when I speak to you about your time in Morocco and your time in Siberia, I get very, very excited because I can see it. Yeah. The images are very clear. Yeah. We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up this interview, again, which has been a very colorful one, and we're going to take you back to your time in Toronto, obviously, which is where you are now, as an educator, as a humanitarian. So please stay with us. You're watching Via Hafta TV, taking you into the world of empathy with Epstein. If you'd like to learn more about Via Hafta, please go to our website at viahafta.org. We tweet a lot, something you know nothing about.
Right.
You're not that progressive, right? We have a Facebook and, of course, all the things you're supposed to have nowadays. We're pretty impressed with our organization. We've done some beautiful things. And you joined us about a year ago when Sarah Zeltzer, who is the director of our international department, went on maternity leave. How's it been?
This has been a wonderful year. I've enjoyed every minute of the involvement with the Hafta, the ability to sort of continue the international work and also sort of do some work in education for the Hafta. So it's been wonderful.
Yes, at the risk of sounding like Merv Griffin, you know, how they used to hurl accolades at one another for the entire show. The Shiurim, the classes that you brought to Via Hafta were something very special to me and very special to us. I've always tried, for years I've tried to push Torah in Via Hafta, but I'm not a good teacher that way. I'm even struggling with teaching my son that way. So I'm thinking of getting a tutor for him. But there you would be on a Wednesday night, and a bunch of people would pile into our multi-purpose room, and you would be teaching. And not only would you be teaching, you would be teaching stuff that you've written. As an example, you've written a book on the Megillah.
That's true, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is an interesting thesis. You want to talk about the thesis of the book?
On Esther, it's a little complicated, but basically it's a book about what Esther might have been for the couple of hundred years before the rabbis started interpreting it. It might have been a somewhat different book, and when the book comes out, I'll share that with the world.
So keep an eye open for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. A part that we don't want to miss is that you were the director of the Jewish Board of Education here in Toronto, and that's a big job. Because I think it's safe to say that the Toronto Jewish community allocates more money towards Jewish education than most of the major metropolitan Jewish communities around the world. Is that right?
Absolutely, than any community. Toronto is known for its huge support, especially of day school tuition subsidy.
Well, what was the highlight of your stint with the Board of Jewish Education?
Well, the creative part was working with my staff. I had a wonderful staff, probably the best team I've ever assembled in Jewish education. They were creative folks. They believed, like I did, that Jewish continuity is not the formula, that the formula for the future is creative growth, not continuity. And they were all about that kind of work. And it was a pleasure and an honor to work with such a very special, talented group of people.
So you would download programs to the schools, right?
We would work with the schools on their programs. You can't do universal programming for schools that are each one individual and different. But we would work with schools in terms of their own needs and what they considered to be their educational goals.
What were you most excited about?
We did an awful lot of wonderful work in the area of special education. And we also allowed teachers the possibility through a special program of creating their own materials and working in a creative fashion with the things that mattered to them most.
Very good. I must tell you that every time we speak about your stint with the Board of Jewish Education, which really was more than a stint, you always go back to the staff, always.
They were a great group.
And you put together the team.
To some extent, some of them were there when I arrived, but we very quickly coalesced into a wonderful group.
It's like Wayne Gretzky said after scoring 10,000 goals in a game, he said it was a team effort. You know?
Well, it was a team effort. There's no doubt about it.
We like to finish off interviews by bringing out even more of the humanity or character in the person whom we're speaking to. So let me ask you a few questions of a very personal, intimate nature.
Sure.
I'm kidding, we won't go too far. You've adopted a couple kids, right? And what's it like to adopt kids?
Not a simple process.
Yeah.
We adopted children who were not infants. They were 6 and 7 when they came to us. They were siblings, Sarit and Yoni, a girl and a boy, born in Israel, and they had had a very, very difficult childhood. And the process was not simple, but slowly, over many years, we've seen wonderful progress, and they're now adults finding their own way.
So you turned into a parent overnight with a 5 and 6-year-old.
Yes, it's a little strange.
It's like winning a lottery and all of a sudden you're a millionaire.
You wake up one morning and there are these 2 other human beings in the house.
Are you a good dad?
Am I a good dad? Oh, my God. I'm probably not the best dad I could be. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But I'm married to a wife who's a very, very good mother.
She is.
Right.
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color?
Yeah.
Green.
Why do you tell me like I should know that?
I don't know. Everybody knows that my favorite color is green.
How would I know? I never see you wearing green.
I have a green pen.
Do you like St. Patrick's Day?
I do. But green is my color.
Is it? Do you know why?
No.
What are you reading right now?
Maybe it's my years in Morocco. Green is the color of the prophet. I'm not sure.
Okay, there you go.
Maybe.
What are you reading right now?
What am I reading? I'm reading a book on, of all things, particle physics.
Particle physics?
Yeah.
Why?
Something I don't know too much about, and this book was recommended, and I thought that maybe I could sort of expand my horizons.
You know, the great sages say in order to be really eclectic in nature, or ultimately to be a Renaissance man, of which you come pretty close, you have to know the sciences, right?
Yeah, and I haven't been strong in the sciences, so this is my chance.
Yeah. Well, what are your aspirations? What do you want to be when you grow up?
I'd probably like to be an oud player. I'd like to.
You were saying?
Yes, I want to study the oud.
And you're buying one?
I'm buying an oud.
Which is one of the most difficult instruments.
I know. All I managed to play so far is the radio.
You don't even play that so well, right?
Not so well.
We're going to finish off this interview, and I want to tell you how grateful I am for you to be able to spend this year with you.
Pleasure.
And also to interview. I think you're a really special man.
Like with everything, I've learned a great deal.
Yes, and along the road I meet all kinds of people, and I really do think you come close, if not to being a Renaissance man. So I really want to thank you on behalf of Via Hafta and our viewers, and perhaps the entire Jewish world and non-Jewish world, for bringing what you have to the world, such humanity.
My pleasure.
Such humanity. So thank you for being with us.
Great. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Please join us again next week on Via Hafta TV, and I would really ask that you learn more about Via Hafta by taking a look at our website, viahafta.org. We got some pretty cool and funky stuff on there, and being part of what we do, which is Tikkun Olam. Once again, thank you for joining us. You've been watching Via Hafta TV, and we've been taking you into the world of empathy with Dr. Seymour Epstein.